He made everything and everything, didn't he?
Oh, he had to grab a market. He made classical guitars, solid electric guitars, jazz F-hole guitars, acoustic guitars. He made everything.
Linda Kitchen and Chantal de Fraga, welcome to the Australian Music Vault. Now, I was hoping, Linda, you could tell us who and what is Mayton Guitars. How did that story begin?
Well, Bill May was my dad. He was the founder of Mayton Guitars. He was the founder because he couldn't afford to buy a guitar. Guitars in Australia were from America, and so he decided that he could build one. And he thought he had all the attributes to do it. He taught woodworking, he loved wood, he was a musician, he'd done fine arts at school, and he thought he was the man for the job. Well, we're talking about the late 40s. He had a house in Thornbury. So when he resigned from the Education Department, he drove his little car out of the garage and that became his workshop. That was 1946. He made guitars for his friends. He was in bands and he made them for neighbours and for other musicians. And he thought that he could make a guitar as good as any others in the world. So, and he wanted to prove that in Australia we could actually build guitars as good as America. So after building maybe 5 or 6 guitars, he then decided that maybe he could, this could be his livelihood. He could start a company, and that's what he did. His brother Reg was a woodworking machinist. He never thought he'd come on board, but he did. And so the two of them started that in 1946. I was a very little girl then, so I can't remember most of it, but my sister does a little bit. But it was very rudimentary and had the electricity connected to the house. And so they were there for about 3 or 4 years until they realised that, yes, we can sell some of these guitars. We better move to a bigger factory, and he bought the land and built the factory in Canterbury Road. So they went there in the early 50s.
Bill would never have ventured into it unless he had the support of my grandmother, and he asked her, I can't do this without having you on board with me. And she wanted him to live out his dream and supported him. And I mean, that was a lot. Mum, she had 2 little children, and Bill was still playing as a musician at night time and then working all day, making the guitars. And often I think they had, on the weekends, they'd go collect wood when they have it on the top of the roof. And so, yeah, it was very much he had to do that with the support of my grandma. And she was very much to the financial controller of the situation. Bill was the dreamer, and Nana was the sort of, no, you can't have this today, Bill. So she sort of kept him in check, and it was a really good team. Nana went to Frankston for a weekend, I think, with a girlfriend, and then went to what was it, Mum? Like a band. I'm not quite sure, but Bill was there, and he was a musician playing, and Nana's like, oh well, I'm not interested in any musicians, and I think Bill came up to her and sort of they had a little bit of a chat, and away it went from there.
That was a jazz band in those days, but he did play Hawaiian music. It was very popular. And Mum did a bit of the Hawaiian dancing. And they were all his friends in the band too. They were all lifelong friends that were friends when they were, in their 70s. So, yeah, they were very closely knit.
He made everything and everything, didn't he?
Oh, he had to grab a market. He made classical guitars, solid electric guitars, jazz F-hole guitars, acoustic guitars. He made everything because...
In consultation with a lot of the musicians that he was working with. So he would get their feedback about certain things, and he was receptive to their input from the very early days, I think.
When he first started, they would have been acoustic guitars. Dad used to play at night to be able to afford to even, buy wood and... Yeah, so it was acoustic guitars and probably the odd ukulele.
They were the F-hole guitars, though, the early ones, like the Mayfair and...
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it was big body jazz guitars in those days.
That's what he was making, yeah.
Yes.
Well, he used Australian timbers, but had to disguise them as sort of American timbers because it wouldn't have been as well received.
Well, there was always that tall poppy syndrome, Everyone thought that Australia couldn't be as good as other people, and he wanted to prove that, well, he could. And yeah, he did. He used to call rosewood when it wasn't rosewood, and yes, but it was very difficult to get wood too because it was just at wartime. So yeah, he could just have to buy whatever he could. And today we're using Australian timbers and so proud of it. It differs us from really other brands. I strongly support any Australian product that I can get into our product. And yeah, we use lots and lots of rosewood and all Australian timbers because they sound good, they look good, and it's a point of difference. Well, actually, I don't know exactly how he did that because it was very difficult. All I remember is sitting in the car coming home from school, getting in the car and delivering guitars all over the place because Dad had to do everything. He was the courier, he was the maker. He had rudimentary product machines in the factory because you couldn't buy anything. It was a difficult job. He had his own designs too, Dad, which was terrific. The Master Sound, the Firebird, these were guitars he built in the 50s. He loved design. It was a passion for him. We couldn't survive the way he did it in those days. He'd build 6 guitars and decide not to do that and have another design and build something else. But yeah, well, rock and roll was a big deal. And so you had to be on board to actually be part of it.
One of the most interesting or surprising stories to me was that Elvis Presley played an FG 100 in the filming of Jailhouse Rock, and we had no idea until Scotty Moore was the guitarist in Elvis's band, and he contacted us, putting the website together and wanted to find out a bit more about this Maton guitar, and prior to that we had no idea. So that was a wonderful story. Someone like Elvis playing one of, and it's extraordinary if you think about at that time how that actually left Australia and ended up in America is amazing.
And we didn't know for 30 years.
So that was a fascinating story. It's an interesting little story. He's sort of Keith, his memory, I think, is a bit all over the place, so you sort of had to pick a story about how he found it. But I think he said that he was having someone slept over at his house and left their guitar, which was an EG 240, and then he sort of picked it up and took it to the recording of Give Me Shelter, and as he was playing, I think was at the last chord, the neck fell off the guitar as he was playing it.
But you can hear it on the recording,
yeah,
is it?
When the Stones came out here, was it 2 years ago, we made a replica of that original guitar for Keith and presented that to him. And I was staggered to know that he's kept that original guitar. He still has it. and which was
That's
a
the one with
surprise
the
to me.
broken neck.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's
They
and he's
had it
restored
fixed,
it.
restored
yeah,
it.
so a little Australian guitar in massive history like that was pretty exciting.
And he was ever so pleasant. And
Oh, he's lovely.
he was very, very good to us. And he asked how my dad was. And I said, he died 25 years ago. Oh, he said. And then, and then later when we left, he said, oh, give my regards to your dad, will you? And I went, all right. The Seekers were one of the first really bands that went overseas playing Maton guitars. They had a huge amount of people. It was a very successful band, and they played Matons from the beginning and still do. The Strangers, but they wanted a different shaped guitar. So John Farrow and the other guitarist, they sat down with Dad and together they designed the El Toro, which was very different. It had two big pieces at the head and they were yellow and white and all these different colours. So that was their signature, these guitars. Mum was very good at what she did. She did shorthand and all of that, as you did in those days. All the boys used to have a green sheet at work and all of them had to fill in what they made, and it was all timed. And so Mum had quite a system of being able to understand how long it took to make what guitar. And so she used to add it up and priced it accordingly. Yeah, so she really, she was the finance behind what they built, what they bought, what they could afford. And she and Dad used to have a few little ups and downs because Dad wanted to do what he wanted to do. And if that meant buy more wood or buy more pickups or do that, he was just, he was demanding and knew what he wanted. But together, they were a team. They were a good team. And they lived and worked together forever. And, Dad was like that. There was a Burwood boys' home near where Canterbury, where he was. Boys that got into trouble, and Dad employed lots of them.
He was very community-minded, though,
He was very
wasn't he?
community. And he had a few things stolen and stuff. But Dad thought if 1 out of 4 worked out okay, it was worth the effort. And we also put on a boy that had broken his back falling out of a tree, and he was 18. And so we employed him. He had a wheelchair, had to widen all the doors, get ramps put in the days when people never did that. And Dad organised a car for him down the track, and he worked for us for about 20 years until he couldn't. But Dad was a very caring, he loved his work, he loved it. He was wonderful, and it was lovely working with Dad. I loved it.
But also, I guess, having the book to have his memory honoured and was really important because he's made such a massive contribution to music in Australia. It's huge. I mean, as you see with the stories in the book, how far and wide his beautiful guitars reached people in Australia and overseas. So it's something to be really proud of, and he should be really proud of his little guitar that is now on the world stage. And it's.
But Mum would always say it's not about him. It's about he wanted it to be an Australian achievement, very much. And it's terrific to know. He'd love to know now that
The amount of export that we're doing.
We're doing. Well, when Alan's and Billy Hyde's fell over, I said, I think we should go to China. I think sell over there, not make over there. So I went over there with David, and we got a distributor, and they are buying about 1,000 guitars a year. I'll never sell out of Australia, ever. We will always manufacture in Australia. But we sell to Europe, sell to Japan,
But I guess a lot of the export was facilitated by having Tommy Emmanuel living and working in Europe, and for people like, especially in Italy, he was massive in Italy and in Germany, and he spread our message massively. And then, you know, people like Josh Homme from the Queens of the Stone Age playing our BB 1200, that got us on the radar in America.
But we
Keith
haven't
Urban
quite got in there
America.
yet.
Oh, we're getting a
We're
foothold.
getting there.
And
That's our hardest market, America, because they're the home of guitars, you know. And Americans will say, what can you do that we can't do better? Well, we're getting in there
But
now.
a lot of the musos love the fact that we make a local product made, you know, in Australia. I mean, you know, Jesse Devil from Eagles of Death Metal, he loved coming to our factory in Box Hill, coming to the barbecue. We put on a barbecue for our staff once, once every couple of months, and they loved that we're, you know, a family-run business.
Oh, well, I suppose in the 60s they would have. Maton was always an aspirational guitar because it was always costly. It was, you know, we could never make cheap guitars, so we never tried to. Dad always wanted to make good quality, good sounding, great guitars. So for most people you talk to will always say, oh, I remember that Maton was my first guitar and I remembered having it, and I wish I'd still kept it.
With like Tommy Emmanuel. So Tommy got his first, that was a Master Sound, wasn't it? When he was about 5 or 6, and his father gave him that. So Phil and Tommy, that was their first guitar. Keith Urban's first guitar was a Maton and Elba when he was about 6 or 7, and it is a very big theme with a lot of the guys that we've been associated with for a really long time. And that's why they have, I think, such fond memories of Maton, because it was often their first guitar as a child, and then to be able to, as their careers progressed, to be able to afford to buy a Maton, that was a beautiful quality product that worked for them.
Dad only had retailers, like 2 retailers in each state. Brash's and Allen's were in Melbourne, and Jeff Brash was a good personal friend of Dad's, and he had good relationships with all the dealers that he dealt with. Well, we're talking about the 80s when I had 4 children, so I decided to come back into the business after having children. My husband was a school teacher and he worked part-time for Dad. So the time came where it was difficult for Dad he had Parkinson's, and we didn't know for years actually. And so it was a time when I think the staff we only probably had 6 people, and it was a very financially and in every way, it was a very difficult time. So Neville and I had a discussion about what the future would be, and we decided that we wanted to buy the company because we wanted to make rise and fall on our own decisions. And so we made an offer, and Mum and Dad took the offer, and so it was a difficult decision. But, you know, never ventured, never gained. You've got to give it a go. If it works, it works. If it didn't, it didn't. And so from that day on, we then did concentrate a lot more on the acoustic guitar. We thought, let's try it with an onboard pickup, which became really a lifesaver. It was the best thing we ever did, because acoustic guitars, none of them really had a pickup attached to it. You had to buy one to put one on. So that was in the late 80s, and we stayed in the original building in Canterbury Road until we found out that we thought that we could grow the business more, and so we built a factory in Bayswater. And slowly, we put on more staff, and gradually we built the product up. Oh, well, we're a quality handmade guitar. We use Australian woods. We have a distinctive sound. Because we have Australian woods, it makes it different. The guys at work, if they can hear a Maton It's distinctively different. And it's the way I will always be too. You know, I'll never want to... We make probably 7,000, 8,000 guitars a year. I'd never want to get to making twice or three times that, because we'd lose the soul of what Dad started. You know, people come to the factory and they get really blown away seeing the amount of handwork that he's done, and that is the signature of Maton too. Well, the core business is solid wood acoustic guitars, and I suppose the more and more we do export, they want the higher level guitar. We know where Tommy Emmanuel is anywhere in the world because we get all these emails from Russia to Japan to China. He does over 300 concerts a year. How on earth he does it, I don't know. Acoustic guitars, they're in more demand than electrics if you look at it as an overall guitars around the world. Well, at the moment, it's 90% acoustic. We do the Josh Homme guitar, which is
The BB1200.
which is a BB1200.
And that's a very popular guitar.
But look, nothing ever stays the same. And as we drive our acoustics and we get financially stronger, we certainly are going to move into more electrics because it's part of our history. And lots of people want them too. It's a very emotional product, electric. People get emotionally involved. No, they maybe had one and they want it again. They lost it on the journey and they wish they had it. So we want to achieve that goal too.
Mum wanted to have our history documented, and my grandmother is 97 years old, and it was fundamental, I think, for Mum to have that done while she was still alive, and for her to be proud of it. And then we just had no idea how to put 70 years of history into one book. Was a really challenging thing to do, and we had a lot of photographic images that we'd had along the journey, and then how we get a thread of our history and the stories of the musicians behind the book. And then we spoke to a company and they suggested that we focus on, stories behind the songs, and that's how it happened. So we based the particular guitar of the decade that was the hero guitar, and then built up a story. And James Gear, who's an amazing photographer, shot those for us. They were a lot of fun to build, and just for everyone to have a look at the flat lay decade to see what was going on at the time was interesting. You can look at them for hours and then find something different that you didn't necessarily see the first time. So the hero guitar of the 1950s flat lay was the Mayfair guitar, which was one of the first guitars that Bill made. It was a beautiful F-hole guitar that was very popular in the sort of late 40s and 50s.
And quite expensive too.
Yeah, in the 1960s, one of the hero guitars we chose to feature in the flat lays was the Firebird, and that particular guitar that we used was a beautiful red electric guitar that is very distinctive, and a lot of people still ask about the Firebird today.
Neil Finn has a Firebird. He's got a red 12-string Firebird, and he plays it for particular songs very often. He loves it.
The 1980s flat lay, that was an interesting story about the guitar that we chose to feature in that flat lay. Brian Ritchie has a beautiful bass guitar and a beautiful Maton bass, and he let us use his original guitar in that flat lay from the Violent Femmes. So that was that was lovely of him to lend us that. And we had a long association with the Violent Femmes, and that was through my grandfather, funnily enough, in the 80s. And that was certainly not a kind of band that my grandfather would be, but he loved all kinds of music, and he'd heard about them. They came to Melbourne and he invited them to come to the factory in Canterbury. And that's how that relationship started. And again, that's a relationship that we've had from the 80s to currently to now. And they still play mate on basses, or Brian Ritchie does, and Gordon Gano still plays our acoustic guitars. So that's a nice little, that was a nice little sentimental guitar used in that flat lay.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, well, Colin Hay, we've got a great relationship with him. We've got such good singer-songwriters. Colin Hay, Paul Kelly. They're beautiful writers and they're beautiful guitarists too.
John Butler, and when Ben Harper came to visit the factory, we thought he was going to be there for, half an hour, ended up spending half the day there because they love it, and they love seeing the guitars, seeing the boys work on the guitars and the smell of the factory, and it's just got an amazing, it's hard to describe unless you go to the factory, but it's got a really good feel to it. Don't you think, Mum?
Oh, yes. And now we've got Andy Allen, who makes custom shop guitars. He worked with us he's been with us for over 20 years. And he makes one-offs, and he's up to his 1,000 now, nearly. And these guitars sell from 5,000 to 15,000. And so when people like Colin Hay come, I think he's bought about 3 because they just see that, and their guitars are beautiful, they sound great, and they just can't resist them. A musician always wants to buy another one.
They don't want one, they want 10, they want 20. But what I think I love about our guitars, though, is that a lot of these amazing musicians, they choose to play a mate on because they love it and they love the sound of it. We don't sort of, financially endorse anyone. You can't tell a guitarist, to play something. They'll play it if they want to.
They've got to love it. They've got to want it. It's got to be the sound they want. It's got to do the job, and I'm sure we succeed. But look, you've always got to keep doing better and better. You've always got to lift the bar. Better ways of painting. We use UV curing now, which we never used to. They sound better, it's better. There's always better ways of doing things, and you've always got to be spending money. It's the way it is. But we're in an environment, I love going to work every day. I love it. I love my staff. We've got 70.
And most of them are all musicians, obviously.
All musicians, and a lot of them have been there for 20 years and over. So, yeah, surround yourself with good people. Very important. And have a good relationship with them. So they could knock on your door and talk to you anytime. Oh, you don't have strategies, you just deal with it. But in the beginning it was pretty tough, but I think anything that's tough makes you stronger. And you've got to get the respect from people, and I've probably demanded it over the years. But my staff will really respect me and I respect them. It's a dual thing. And I have a great relationship with them all. More women in the industry, let's go.